shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
About 2 weeks ago, a family landed in our town. And I had heard about them long before I actually ever met them. They were discussed a lot on social media. On the one hand, there were folks saying, there's this really nice family that needs help, please go help them. And on the other hand, there were people saying, call social services. All of that kind of conversation was brewing about long before I met them. The day I met them, I had walked to the grocery store. And as I was coming down into Safeway's parking lot, I had to walk right past the mama who was holding the sign that said, please help, or something to that effect, holding the baby. And I tried to walk past, and I didn't get very far, and then I went back and asked what I could do. Well, in the midst of the conversation I was having with her, the police officer came. And the police officer spent 10, 15 minutes chatting with her, trying to figure out where she was staying and what she needed. And the police officer was incredible. He kept saying, you're not in trouble, I'm trying to help. You're not in trouble, I'm trying to help. And finally, he came to the core of it. He goes, I had to come investigate because you have been turned in because somebody did not believe you had an adequate blanket. So they called us. They had the conversation. I walked with her down to Safeway so we could find some things for her. And when we got down to Safeway, the husband and the 4 other children were at Safeway. And they were there in the doorway. And quite honestly, they were making a ruckus. There's no two ways about it. But the woman who came and chose to try to teach him how to parent on the spot and was chewing him out, and then when that wasn't effective, went and got a manager and went and got checkers, and so there was this whole group of people apparently trying to help him parent of some sort. Now, the whole thing felt pretty wretched. But it wasn't until I got to the readings this week that I was able to put my finger on what the wretchedness was. It is so often that we take this God of ours and we reinvent him in our image. And the funny thing about it is when we reinvent God in our image, the very same people that irritate us tend to irritate that God that we've created, or the very same people that we judge and condemn are the people that we somehow see God judging and condemning. And for me, when I was able to get away from it, I realized that's where it landed. It felt like these folks were being judged and condemned instead of being helped. If I really believed the blanket wasn't adequate, do I call the policeman and say, go arrest the person because the blanket's not adequate, or do I go buy a blanket that is adequate? And if the children are being a handful in the store, do I yell at the parent because the children are being a handful, or do I show the parent where a park is? Today, at the end of this reading from John, we land in that 3:17 place. We have a God who loves us, and it's not about condemning or judging, but a God that desires to save us. That's this God that we follow. That is the good news, not condemnation and judgment, but love and salvation. So on this Holy Trinity Sunday, Father, Son, Spirit, we are invited into that dance. What does it mean to follow this God who is a God of love and a God of salvation? What does it look like? Well, let's start with Isaiah. Because Isaiah is given this incredible vision of what this God of ours looks like. And the vision is so huge, so incredible, that the hem of God's garment fills the temple. God's glory is revealed. Now, it's a very interesting thing. Isaiah says God's glory is revealed throughout nature, throughout all of creation. How often do we see it? Huge question. But in that moment, what Isaiah sees in the temple knocks him aside, because Isaiah, like anyone else, when they come face to face with an encounter with God, is humbled by his own inadequacy and his own sin. So the seraph takes the tongue and brings the tongue and purifies Isaiah. He has an experience with God that doesn't leave him condemned and damned, but the experience with God leaves him purified. And at the conclusion, who shall I send? And Isaiah is in a place, because he's been touched, he's been changed, to say, here I am. Send me. The language that St. Paul uses in his letter to the Romans is a little bit different, but it's still that language of a God who has created this way in this space. It's language of adoption. In our baptism, we were adopted. We were claimed as God's own. And what St. Paul has to say to us is, if you've been claimed as God's child, you are God's child. And if you are God's child, you are an heir to all the promises. On this Holy Trinity Sunday, when we come face to face with Spirit and Creator and Son, each one of those encounters has something very specific involved that kind of unites them. Adoption is not what we do. It is done and given to us. And likewise, in that text from John, the Spirit, the wind blows where it will. We do not control the wind, nor, I love that there was chuckling about the whole being born again, nor do we control our own birth. All these images for what it means to live as children, as heirs with the Trinity, are all images about what God has provided for us, calling us his beloved, claiming us as children, the wind blowing where it will. Birth, certainly nothing we have any control over. God's gifts to us over and over and over again. So on this day, on this Holy Trinity Sunday, as we are invited into the dance, into what it means to be a part of the family of God, may somehow, somewhere, God work that very same humility in us that Isaiah had. Here I am, God. Send me. Whether it's me with the blanket, or it's me pointing the way to the park, or if it's me with a word of grace or forgiveness. Here I am, Lord. Send me. Amen.
Well, this light of mine